Thief had stolen Albert Einstein's brain in order to discover his secret to being so smart. Albert Einstein's brain was stolen shortly after his death by a pathologist who wanted to study it. Einstein had forbidden this, knowing that such studies rarely provide useful information. The pathologist, Dr. Thomas Harvey, removed Einstein's brain, divided it into 240 pieces, and stored it in 2 mason jars. Dr. Harvey kept Einstein's brains for decades, storing it in various places with the hope of unlocking the secrets of Einstein's intelligence. However, the studies that were conducted on Einstein's brain did not provide significant findings and were not conducted effectively. Today, what remains of Einstein's brain is kept at the Penn Medicine Princeton Medical Center and is not available for viewing. Some pieces of Einstein's brain may also still be found across America, as Dr. Harvey gave away some pieces to friends. And I bet you didn't know that this may have been the worst video game to ever exist. In 1982, Steven Spielberg approached Atari about making an E.T. video game. Atari president Steve Ross paid $21 million for the rights to the E.T. game, which meant he would need to sell 4 million copies to break even. In order to achieve this, Atari needed to have the game ready for the Christmas sale season. The problem was that Spielberg and Atari made their deal in July of that year. Game designer Howard Scott Warshaw only had 5 weeks to make a viable product. Despite the tight deadline, Warshaw finished the game and Spielberg signed off on it. But the designer later called it the toughest 5 weeks he has ever endured. The game hit stores with lots of excitement, but gamers soon began complaining about its confusing gameplay system and E.T.'s tendency to fall into holes and get stuck. And that is why
this one trick made this guy famous. In 1899, while performing in Europe, a man was challenged by police officers to escape from their handcuffs. This is a common challenge that this man faced during his early career as an escape artist. But on this particular occasion, the officers had a special set of cuffs made specifically to be escape-proof. The man accepted the challenge, and to the surprise of everyone, he was able to escape from the handcuffs in just a matter of seconds. This impressive feat drew the attention of the crowd and the press, which helped this man establish his reputation as a master of escape. This incident helped him make a name for himself as a young illusionist and escape artist, and from then on, he was known as the Handcuff King, or Harry Houdini. And I bet you didn't even know how. Picture a world where cars run on nuclear power and can travel thousands of miles. In the 1950s, many people were excited about the possibilities of nuclear power. The Ford Motor Company even came up with the ambitious concept car that would run a small nuclear reactor in the trunk. The car was called the Ford Nucleon, and it promised to be very fuel efficient with a range of about 5,000 miles per charge and emit no harmful pollutants. The idea was that the car's reactor could be swapped out at special charging stations similar to the ones that we have with Teslas, but unfortunately the project was eventually scrapped because the technology to make safe, small enough reactors and the proper shielding materials did not yet exist. But for now, we can only hope, and this has got to be the smartest idiot to ever live. In 2003, a man named Brian Wells walked into a bank in Erie, Pennsylvania with a bomb collar strapped to his neck. He handed the teller a note demanding money and saying that the bomb would go off if he did not receive it. The teller gave Wells the money and he left the bank, but was stopped by police a short distance away. Wells told the police that he had been forced to commit the robbery by a group of people who had threatened to detonate the bomb if he didn't comply. As the police tried to figure out how to disarm the bomb went off, killing Wells. The case became known as the Pizza Bomber case, and became a media sensation and was subject to several documentaries and TV shows. It was eventually revealed that Wells was actually part of a plot by a group of acquaintances to rob the bank, but he had been unaware that the bomb was actually real and that his life was in danger. And that's why I'd say, this has got to be the chillest guy in the world. In 2016, a Malaysian man named Maud Marzuki was on his way home from work when he was attacked by a crocodile. The crocodile dragged him into a river and held him underwater for several minutes before finally letting him go. Miraculously, Marzuki survived only with little injuries. He attributed his survival to the fact that he remained calm and did not struggle, which prevented the crocodile from biting him more aggressively. Marzuki's story was widely reported in the media, and he became known as the Crocodile Man. And that's why I'd probably say that I guess all heroes don't actually wear capes. In 2007, a man named Wesley Audrey was waiting for a subway train with his 2 young daughters when a man suddenly had a seizure and fell onto the tracks. Audrey quickly jumped down onto the tracks, and as the train was approaching, he laid down into the shallow trench between the rails and covered the man with his own body. The train passed over them just inches above their head, and Audrey saved the man's life. He was bravely honored by the city of New York and the President of the United States for his bravery. And this proves that this is one of the craziest miracles ever. In 1991, a woman named Julian Kopeske was the sole survivor of a plane crash in the Amazon rainforest. The plane she was on was struck by lightning, causing it to crash, killing 91 of the 92 passengers on board. Julianne, who was only 17 at the time, was thrown from the plane and landed in the jungle. Despite being injured and alone in the wilderness, she managed to walk for 10 days through the jungle, surviving on rainwater and chocolate before being rescued. She now has several books and movies about her. That's why I'd probably say that this guy might be the luckiest person ever. In the 1990s and 2000s, a man named Frank Salak, a Croatian music teacher, had a string of the most incredible and unbelievable luck and survival. Throughout those years, Salak had several brushes with death, including surviving a train accident, a plane crash, a bus accident, a car explosion, and falling off a boat. But he managed to walk away from all of them with only minor injuries. And then in January 1995, he even won the lottery, which he used to retire and live a quiet life. His story became widely known and he was labeled as the world's luckiest man. And that's why we may never know if these guys reached the top of Mount Everest. In the early 1920s, a man named George and his partner Andrew set out to become the first people to ever summit Mount Everest. They had attempted the climb twice before, but both times had to turn back due to bad weather. On June 8, 1924, George and Andrew set out for the summit once again. They were last seen alive just a few hundred meters from the top, but they never returned. For 75 years, it was a mystery as to whether or not they had actually reached the summit before they died. Then, in 1999, George's body was discovered on the mountain and it was determined that he had died from a fall. But there was no evidence to indicate whether or not he and Andrew had reached the summit. Then, in 2021, a team of climbers found Andrew's camera, which was still functioning and contained a photograph of George and Andrew together on the North Ridge. The photograph was taken just before they disappeared, which is now named the last photograph of Mallory and Irvine. This does confirm that they were very close to the summit, but it remains unknown that if they actually reached it or not. And that's why this is probably the coolest guy you'll ever meet. In 1972, a group of robbers led by a man named Frank Abagnale Jr. committed a series of daring heists across the United States using a variety of clever disguises and fake identities to evade capture. Abagnale faked to be a Pan Am pilot, a pediatrician, a lawyer, and so many other professions, and cashed over $2.5 million in forged checks. He was eventually caught by the FBI and served time in prison, but while he was on the run, he managed to escape from custody twice and even taught a class on how to detect fraudulent checks to FBI agents while on the run. After serving his time, Abagnale became an expert on fraud and security and worked with the government and private companies to help prevent financial crimes. Today, his story is inspired by the wildly popular book and movie Catch Me If You Can. And that's why this has got to be the smartest idiot to ever live. In 2003, a man named Brian Wells walked into a bank in Erie, Pennsylvania with a bomb collar strapped to his neck. He handed the teller a note demanding money and saying that the bomb would go off if he did not receive it. The teller gave Wells the money and he left the bank, but was stopped by police a short distance away. Wells told the police that he had been forced to commit the robbery by a group of people who had threatened to detonate the bomb if he didn't comply. As the police tried to figure out how to disarm the bomb went off, killing Wells. The case became known as the Pizza Bomber case, and became a media sensation and was subject to several documentaries and TV shows. It was eventually revealed that Wells was actually part of a plot by a group of acquaintances to rob the bank, but he had been unaware that the bomb was actually real and that his life was in danger. And that's why I'd say this man's quick thinking saved so many lives. In January 2009, a US Airways Airbus A320 piloted by Captain Chelsea Sully Sullenberger was taking off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City when a flock of geese flew into both engines, causing them to fail. Sully immediately realized that the plane would not be able to make it near any nearby airports and decided to attempt a water landing in the Hudson River. Thanks to his quick thinking and his expert flying skills, Sullenberger was able to land the plane safely on the river, and all 155 passengers and crew members survived. The incident is known as the Miracle on the Hudson and became a media sensation, and Sullenberger was hailed as a hero for his actions. The event got praised by the media and public and later on got made into a movie called Sully. And that's why